Hi class, welcome back from spring break. We're going to begin on Module 8 and this includes two chapters, Chapter 9 and Chapter 11. It brings together work and media as you start to explore these chapters, and you're going to see that you have a number of videos to watch. Is Walmart good for America? As well as looking at the news media, is what the news coverage, does it go too far, as well as looking at social media and the positives. So let's pop over to the PowerPoints and examine these and see where we're looking at the issues within um, the social problems. So, changing nature of work. We've already talked about this within the course. In the Industrial Revolution shifts the economy from agriculture to industry. It changes the family. It puts men in a breadwinning position. It allows men to have higher paying jobs, women working lower jobs, people related to diversity paying lower jobs, and it was significant as it brought into place. And the Industrial Revolution creates this environment of factory work, good levels of wages, and then the service revolution begins in the 1960s, where we see the change moving from industry to service industry, where people leave the manufacturing because it's not here, and we see that shift of manufacturing. A lot of this is related to multiple things, including globalization and the cost of industry. So the 10 occupations with the largest projected job growth are basically service jobs. So retail salesperson, or service jobs in other ways like registered nurses or even post-secondary teachers, the demand for higher education and teaching coming into place. There has been widespread deindustrialization, so that manufacturers lost millions of jobs since 2000, and those jobs were moved to other countries. They, in many cases, disappeared to technology. So there was a large loss of manufacturing jobs, and they were replaced by those low on paying service jobs or no jobs at all. And so we see this issue of employment coming into place. Now let's look at back a little bit, and we look at World War II, and we saw women enter the workforce in large numbers. Now remember, women were always working, but they did not have the opportunity to work these higher paying jobs. And so during World War II, they were admitted into the industry. They held up the manufacturing, but they were forced back into their low paying jobs when men returned from the war. In fact, they were fired on the spot, many of them, even though they may have been supporting their families. And they had to give up their jobs. And so that was pretty significant. But women have steadily increased in the labor force, and so has the population of the diverse. Also, we talked about this in aging as well. The elderly are increasingly returning to work, for and working longer hours, working more time. We even have not the graying of the workforce, but we also have what we call gray jobs, that the older adult may have left the workforce and has to return, because they need the money or they want to return, and therefore they're setting up jobs that they may have wanted to do and never were able to as they were supporting their families. So we see this large influx, or the increase of people staying in their jobs create this level of older adults in the workforce. Okay, um, there is significant issues as far as foreign workers coming to this country, and we have this increase of especially those that are admitted to do particular jobs that um, we need in place. So we have foreign workers that are of high levels, but then we also have those that come in for those low paying occupations that do not require high school degrees. So here in our areas that we look up at the Finger Lakes, We look at the migrant workers that pick the grapes that the local people do not want to do, or the farm workers that come into place. And so immigration becomes part of this work issue as well. Let me jump to the perspectives, and I'm going to do this by just looking at the summary. The functionalist perspective used this perspective to examine the function and dysfunction of work, and that work sets this view of how society should be in place, and it sets the structure. And so functionalists really analyze those elements of work that come into place and how we view the job. Conflict talk about the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat and the power of those capitalists over the workers. This is pretty significant as you look at conflict in the feminist perspective here, and the control and who has the control. And we see that today completely, that salaries for employees do not go up. That is the dividends off for those that invest that are more important, and even keeping together that perspective of who gets that problem, and then fighting. We've seen the destruction of unions in the process, because that they support the worker, and the collapse of rules. So states like like Michigan, are now right to work states, that unions cannot control jobs, and employers can fire with no cause. You have no cause in those right to work states, in hoping to improve the employment perspectives for the population. From the interactionist perspective, sociologists investigate how our work experience creates our roles and our meanings and how we see things. And we see that work is a very powerful piece of understanding who we are and our association with our work and how it comes into place. So, what are the social problems? Underemployment and unemployment. And underemployment is really a big issue. There are a significant number of people that are doing jobs that they are overqualified for, or they are working in jobs that um, do not provide them full-time work. Significantly, we have moved to contracting for employees, because that way benefits don't have to be paid uh, in that place. And so if you contract, you're not responsible for it providing insurance and all of those other things that come into place. And therefore, we can pay them less. But underemployment is keeping people working at less than full time, which allows them to look at services. This is why that Walmart video is there for you to watch. Then there's a high level to unemployment, and it's linked with the higher levels of alienation and depression. And here we're into those sociological terms as we look at anomie and alienation coming into place, and that's separation from society. So there's that high level of separating one from feeling like they can belong in society, and where do they go? Globalization is a significant issue that has come into place, and there's good and bad in globalization. You're going to see that in a video, hopefully, when we look at urbanization. But it's not a new phenomena. Think about things that were shipped to this country to build our industry for us to do that we shipped elsewhere. That it's a process by where goods flow between countries that come into place. And these positives aspects include the fact that it creates a world market, and we get the chance to have multiple different products available to us, as well as it creates a new middle class for those countries that are supporting the economy. And we see this difference of foreign trade. However, it is the unequalness of this foreign trade that becomes problematic as we look at the country. We could go into political science and really explore. So the downside of globalization is worker security has declined. It also means that workers' rights um, decline because there isn't that competition. The jobs uh, in the United States moved to Canada. Canada was too expensive. They moved to Mexico. Mexico's too expensive. They moved to Indonesia. And so there's always this competition, and we see this loss of manufacturing jobs. Now, there is a report out there that says that manufacturing jobs will be returning to the United States at a much higher level than we've had for a while because of some of the globalization issues, both that uh, the cost is not as advantageous to take it somewhere else or some disruption in those fields. So what has this done? It's created places like Goodyear who could say, go ahead, go on strike. We don't care. We're going to make all our tires somewhere else because they still have to buy our tires. Um, and so that we can see those manufacturing jobs lost, but it also then has allowed for dropping of wages and not allowing a livable wage. So we have this argument over minimum wage, and this is going on all the time. And you're currently talking about um, the differences, and our book is way off, and this slide is way off when we start looking at the fact that we're talking now about a minimum of $10 an hour for a federal wage, and state wages don't necessarily match that here as we look at our particular area. And for those of you that are away, you can please think of your own areas as well. New York pays a much higher minimum wage state-wise than Pennsylvania, and we're right here on the border between the two. It's pretty substantial as you look at the difference in where things can happen. So there are significant issues as we explore that. Other social problems include discrimination in the workplace. And we've addressed this through numerous laws, but the complaints about discrimination continue. Um, Other items are sweatshops. Sweatshops exist in this country, and they're out there. And they're pretty strong as far as how people exist. There's no livable wage or benefits, and poor and hazardous working conditions. Now, think about the EPA, who has gone into place to try to make things safer within the work environment. And because many of these operate underneath that process, then the worker's not protected within, and health issues arise. There have been expanded employment opportunities for women, pretty significant as we've seen the change in the workforce. And we've seen businesses that actually believe in their workers, and they have given such things to keep workers in place as far as dependent benefits and flex time, more leave time, even daycare centers on the premises. So things are not all bad as we look at labor, but think about the social problems that are there and how we're facing them. Now, labor unions were fighting back, and we noticed the drop in labor unions significantly. They've lost the ability to bargain and serve as the agent for the worker, and they've had to give up more and more. Few are very strong today as they try to protect their workers. As I mentioned, the Goodyear example before. Now, we're also looking at media, so let me bring this to media here. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time in media because you've got some movies on it, but you've also done some things related to media. Media is much more than television. It's much more than newspapers. It is the internet. It is the examples. Media is every bit of our lives. Think about this class. We're really media, aren't we? We're posting it on YouTube so that you can see the videos. Media is blamed for directing and creating and promoting social problems. In fact, when you look at the definition of social problems from the very beginning, media is how we determine what a social problem is. That it's been brought on by the general population as important. You know, it's like crime. Crime is actually dropping in this country, but we don't know that from the media, do we? It defines us as we go through the process. Again, I'm going to pop down to the summary of the perspectives, so I won't spend too much time here looking at two chapters. The length gets pretty substantial out there. But the functionalists examine the relationship, the structure between media and social institutions, and how they come into place. And they use this as a perspective for looking at their dynamics. The conflict theorist focuses on the power of the media and who owns the media and the control of the media and the stereotypes that go in place from the feminist viewpoint, but especially as we look at who controls things. Think about the elections when they come up. Who buys those commercials? The people with the most money. How do we see what's in that? Who owns newspapers? Who owns televisions? And so places like Comcast, or when we look at GE owning NBC, and they own Universal, and they own all these other things, they affect us, and they give us what they want into place. And there is this push and shove in that prospect. From the interactionist perspective, sociologists investigate how it defines our social reality, how we see ourselves in the process. So media. Media is owned by private organizations, but is controlled by the federal government. And many of those federal controls have disappeared under the pressure of those who own the media. And so we've seen many drops of what's decent and indecent coming into the home, and the language has totally changed. We have this digital divide. Does everyone have access to the technology that drives the media? And there has been some move to say that everyone needs access to the internet, so that they can be in place, because otherwise part of the society is marginalized. What other problems exist with this? Does media control our lives? We have a significant level of media addiction. Students who cannot let go of their cell phones, or they have to be on checking their Facebook, their Twitters, all of those accounts every minute, but also the gaming issue. And what we've seen is an increase of online gaming addiction coming into place. And then even going into cyber worlds. Sociology especially is studying the cyber addiction of living in cyber worlds in that process. Big Brother is watching us. Every click we make is tracked. When we go to search on the internet, they know what we've clicked on before from that computer, and our search on one computer and an identical search on the other will produce different things, because they know that they're going to put the things that you are most likely to have clicked on before. So they will draw you to that conservative viewpoint or liberal viewpoint if you've been there before. We have multiple things that come into place, and social media companies scrutinize the information they receive. And now we've got things like the television coming into our home. They can check to see what we view, and they analyze that, and they actually are in our homes. So there's problems. Now, on average in the United States, people watch 3 hours a day of television, and it really is, for many, much higher than that, 6 hours for children. And we have this constant influence that television is often spending more time with children than parents are in that process, and therefore there's less physical activity. And we look at some of those problems that you guys presented in your posters, the issues of obesity in children, and the problem with the media. And do you trust the media? And clearly, very different points of view, from going from Fox News to CBS or NBC, and we have this liberal versus conservative viewpoint. But in reality, our news media really controls what comes in. Look at international news, and we never even find out half the stories that go into place. And who's watching the media? what's going on, and the elimination of the printed word, newspapers folding on a regular basis also come into place. We need to be aware of what's going on and the problems. And so we look at this principles of media literacy, the construction, what it means to you in the process. All of these things I think that are very important for you to view as you explore this chapter. I hope you find a lot of issues that we've already started to address in other areas, and you can tie all the social problems. One social problem affects another, it doesn't it? Constantly going into place. Again, this is a longer video because of the two chapters, but I hope that you can see the tie together to explore this area, um, and continue to look at media throughout every chapter, um, and the issues of work tie to every chapter as well. Have a great day.